Is the season for NBA 2K ratings update. As always, I'm Pete Toll, aka PT Sports 84, back to give you the fourth official NBA 2K25 player ratings update. Today is December 19th, 2024. It's the last ratings update of the year of 2024 for NBA 2K25. So let's dive right into it. Looking at the Philadelphia 76ers, as we always do, Joel Embiid drops -1 to a 94 overall. Tyrese Maxey drops -1 to an 88 overall. Down at the bottom, unfortunately, it looks like Jared McCain is going to be out probably for the year. He actually goes -2 to an 80 overall. Go back up. Kelly Oubre gets a bump +1 to a 79 overall. Caleb Martin gets a drop -1 to a 76 overall. And then Ricky Council IV gets a +2 bump to a 75 overall. Now, we do have some position changes. Yerson Yabusele goes back to power forward. Now, with Embiid out with the nasal fracture, he's probably going to start at center for the foreseeable future. We'll see how that works out with Nick Nurse in the lineups. And then Caleb Martin gets a position change. He's now the backup small forward. I don't know how that's going to change now with um, Jared McCain out. I don't know if they'll move Council down to the 2, play Eric Gordon some more. We'll see kind of what Nick Nurse prefers. Moving on to the Milwaukee Bucks, who just won the Emirates Cup. They celebrated, obviously, Giannis was the MVP. We do get a drop for Chris Middleton, who's coming back from injury. He goes -3 to an 82 overall. Quite a drop for him. We get Torian Prince, who's kind of been ineffective a little bit lately. He goes -1 to a 76 overall. And then Gary Trent, who's actually been doing pretty well over the last couple weeks, finally recovered from injury. He gets a bump back up +2 to a 76 overall. The Chicago Bulls definitely trying to get off Zach LaVine. The new rumors are to Denver. We'll see what happens. I don't really see that per se, unless Denver doesn't get any other deals, but we'll see where they go with that. But Ayu Dosunmu has been playing really well lately. He gets a bump +2 to a 79 overall. Lonzo Ball coming back from injuries, playing reduced minutes as he's on a minutes cap. He goes -1 to a 78 overall. Jalen Smith goes +1 to a 77. Patrick Williams drops -1 to a 75. Finally, they bump Julian Phillips up. He gets a bump +2 to a 74, while also Matas Bezelis gets a bump +1 to a 74. We do get a position change. Taylor Horton Tucker to small forward, while Chris Duarte gets a position change to shooting guard. Going over the Cleveland Cavaliers, we have Darius Garland, who likely is an all-star this year. He gets a bump +1 to an 88 overall. Karis LeVert in the running for Sixth Man of the Year, +1 to an 81 overall. Isaac Okoro, who now looks like he's probably going to miss considerable time. He gets a bump +1 to a 77. We get a position change for Max Strus to shooting guard. And then we get Dean Wade a -1 to a 74 overall. Going over the Boston Celtics. Kristaps Porzingis gets a bump +1 to an 88 overall. Finally, we get a bump to Sam Hauser. It's been a while. I've been kind of advocating for him to get a bump for a couple updates now. He gets a +2 to a 77 overall. Luke Cornett gets his pretty much almost every third update. He gets a bump. He does get a bump +1 to a 77 overall. Going to the Clippers, we get a -1 for James Harden to an 85 overall. And then just two smaller changes for them. Kevin Porter Jr. gets a bump +1 to a 75, while Bones Highland gets a +1 bump to a 75. Going over to the Memphis Grizzlies, Desmond Bain gets a bump back up +1 to an 81 overall. Santi Aldama, who's continued to play well this season, gets a bump +1 to an 80 overall. Brandon Clark, well-deserved bump. Um, really playing well and been effective. +2 to a 79 overall. Scottie Pippen Jr. has kind of been up and down in the rotation. Just depends how much they play Marcus Smart at point guard. He goes -1 to a 78, while Jay Huff gets a bump +1 to a 76. Atlanta Hawks, big bump for Trae Young, +3 to a 92 overall. His playmaking's really been going well. Improved defender. I'm not saying he's a great defender, but improved defender. We get Jalen Johnson going -1 to an 85. And then Zachary Richardson, -1 to a 77 overall. Basically, they pull him pretty early, and then he's really got to get around to shooting the ball, being aggressive. I think that's the biggest thing, staying aggressive. DeAndre Hunter's been fantastic this year, so it's hard to not put him in the lineup. So we'll see what happens with Zachary moving forward. Miami Heat, Tyler Hero gets a bump +1 to an 87 overall. Position change for him to point guard. Well-deserved position change considering he's been the point guard for like 11 games in a row. We get Duncan Robinson, who's now the starting 2 guard, +2 to a 78 overall. Terry Rozier, who's the backup 2 guard, ends up dropping -1 to a 77. Jaime Jaquez, -1 to a 77. And then Drew Smith, who's been playing really good defense, kind of just doing a little odds and end things, doesn't score a ton. He goes +2 to a 73 overall. I expect him to be converted to a standard contract coming up sometime soon. Charlotte Hornets, Brandon Miller gets a bump +1. Somebody has to score on this team while LaMelo was out with injury. It looks like LaMelo is coming back. If not the next game, the game after that. We get Cody Martin dropping -2 to a 76 overall. Seth Curry gets a bump +1 to a 75 overall. Vasa Micic gets a +1 to a 74 overall. Hasn't shot it the greatest, but at least has been able to run the offense with Trey Mann being out for a while, and then now LaMelo obviously having been out. Musa Diabate goes -1 to a 74. He's been playing less since Nick Richards and Mark Williams have been healthy. Williams is back in the starting lineup, by the way. Daquan Jeffries has gotten some playing time due to some sporadic injuries. He goes +2 to a 72. And then down at the bottom, Isaiah Wong has gotten playing time as the backup point guard. He pretty much scores, and that's what he's in there for. He goes +1 to a 69 overall. Utah Jazz, Lauri Markkanen continues to struggle. -1 to an 84 overall. Keontae George +1 to an 80 overall. -1 for Colin Sexton. And then down here, Johnny Jazang +1 to a 72. He's been kind of filling in the rotation here and there, but now Jordan Clarkson's back, so I don't expect Jazang to play a ton. Going over the Sacramento Kings, Domantas Sabonis gets back in the 90 overall club. +1 to a 90 overall. De'Aaron Fox, -1 to an 88 overall. Surprised DeRozan didn't get any kind of bump. Keegan Murray gets a bump +1 to a 79 overall. -1 for Keon Ellis to a 76, and +1 for Kevin Huerter to a 76. Jay Crowder goes -1. Then we have Isaac Jones going +1, both to a 73 overall. Going over to the New York Knicks, who's been playing much better for them has been Mikal Bridges. He does get a bump +1 to an 85 overall. Josh Hart also gets a +1 bump to an 84. And then we get Precious Achiuwa dropping -1 to a 75 overall. LA Lakers, We get some small changes for them. Dalton Connect has been less effective lately, so he goes -2 to a 78. We get Gabe Vincent going +1 to a 73, while Cam Reddish gets a position change back to small forward, and he actually goes -1 to a 73. Position change for Max Christie as he's been starting at the 2. So good to see them make those changes there. I would have liked to seen Connect go back up to small forward potentially, but I guess he plays shooting guard some as well. So it not a big deal there. Orlando Magic, Jalen Suggs +1 to an 84 overall. Obviously, he's been the number one option with both Wagner and Banchero out, so that's why he gets the +1. -1 for Kentavious Caldwell Pope, who has struggled lately. Jonathan Isaac goes +1 to a 78 overall. Cole Anthony finally gets a bump back up to respectable numbers, +3 to a 76 overall. And then Jet Howard, who's been in the rotation lately, goes +1 to a 74. Going over to the Dallas Mavericks, we get some changes for them at the top. Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford both get a +1 bump to an 83 overall. Najee Marshall continues to really thrive in this Dallas offense. He gets a bump +1 to an 81. Quentin Grimes kind of cooled off a little bit, goes -1 to a 77, while Jaden Hardy gets a bump +1 to a 74. Brooklyn Nets, they moved Dennis Schroeder. Probably going to see Cam Johnson moved at some point, and probably either Bogdanovich or Dorian Finney-Smith moved as well. So we'll see where those guys go as we get closer to the trade deadline. Nick Claxton gets a bump +1 to an 82. Speaking of Dorian Finney-Smith, he gets a bump +1 to a 78. Jalen Wilson continues to play well off the bench. He gets position change to small forward and goes +1 to a 76. Day'Ron Sharpe has played well since coming back from injury, +2 to a 76 overall. And then Keon Johnson finally gets recognized by 2K for his play in the rotation for the Nets. He goes +3 to a 72 overall. Noah Clowney also gets a position change to power forward. Moving over to the Denver Nuggets, Aaron Gordon gets a -2 drop. He goes to an 83 overall. Michael Porter Jr. goes -1 to an 82. Then we get a -1 for Christian Brown to an 80. -1 for Russell Westbrook to a 79. +1 for Julian Strawther, who's played well, to a 77. And then Zeke Nnaji gets a -1 to a 71 overall. We got some position changes here. Looks like Trey Alexander has moved to shooting guard. Jalen Pickett to point guard. I'm not seeing anything else. It doesn't look like position-wise. Going over to the Indiana Pacers, Tyrese Halliburton gets a bump +1 to an 88 overall, while Pascal Siakam gets a -1 drop to an 87 overall. Benedict Mathurin's kind of cooled off. He goes -2 to an 81, while TJ McConnell has been hot and goes +1 to an 81. Obi Toppin also playing well lately, +1 to an 81. And then Andrew Nembhard goes -1 to a 78. If you notice, 2K is taking off the injuries for a lot of the teams. As far as guys that were like week to week, that pretty much says that they're going to be a little light in the office as expected because of the holidays. So we'll probably see lesser roster updates going forward until the holiday break is over. If there's a big trade or something, they'll get that in. But you won't see if one guy's injured or something like that. You won't see that replicated as quickly, which is totally understandable. They need to go enjoy their holidays as well. So moving over to the New Orleans Pelicans, Trey Murphy III gets a bump +1 to an 81 overall while getting position change to power forward. Yves Missi gets a +1 bump to an 80 overall. Well-deserved. He is really good. Very underrated. Not a lot of people are talking about him, but they should be. Brandon Boston Jr. gets a bump +1 to a 78 overall. Javonte Green gets a drop -1 to a 74 overall. Detroit Pistons, Cade Cunningham, +1 to an 89 overall. He had an 18 assist triple-double the other night. Really good game for him. I know a lot of people say that overall he's going to be a second option on a really good team. I don't necessarily buy that quite yet. I haven't sold my stock on Cade, but we'll see. Jaden Ivey, -1 to an 81 overall, while Tobias Harris gets a +1 to an 80 overall, +1 for Ron Holland, who's played really well off the bench, especially in defense, +1 to a 75. And then Wendell Moore gets a drop, -1 to a 74. Really quickly, Paul Reed is back on the team. His contract is guaranteed for the rest of the season. Javonte McCoy got paid nicely to sign and then go back to the Motor City Cruise. Going over to the Toronto Raptors, we get a couple small changes for them. Grady Dick has been putting it in the hole. +1, 82 overall for him. He's back from injury. Oshai Agbaji gets a -1 drop to a 77 overall. While Jacoby Walter has played well since coming back from his second injury of the year, +1 to a 74 overall. Going over to the Houston Rockets, we get a drop at the top for their two guys, Fred VanVleet and Jalen Green, both drop -1 to an 82 overall. Dylan Brooks gets a bump +1 to an 81 overall. And then Jayshawn Tate has been playing well lately, +1 to a 74 overall. San Antonio Spurs. We have Harrison Barnes going -1 to a 79 overall, while Jeremy Sohan gets a +1 bump to a 79 overall. Julian Champagnie continues to show out for them, doing a little bit of everything, +1 to a 78. Charles Bassey goes +1 to a 77. He's actually been playing in the rotation. So if you look at his numbers, we know that 2K values rebounding for the center formula, so that's why he's gone up in overall. Probably not exactly what they changed per se, but that's the reason that he would go up, just his rebounding numbers. Scoring decently as well. Malachi Branham gets another drop, -1 to a 75 this time. Going over to the Phoenix Suns, couple changes for them. Well-deserved Tyus Jones, +1 to an 81 overall. He's been really playing well. Really going to earn a good contract. The Suns probably can't bring him back next year, so he'll be elsewhere, but will earn a really good contract. Royce O'Neal gets a bump, +1 to a 78, while Grayson Allen also gets a +1 bump to 78. Going over to the OKC Thunder, very disappointing loss in the Emirates Cup final against the Milwaukee Bucks. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander gets a +1 bump to a 97. He is my prediction for the NBA 2K26 cover athlete. We'll see if that comes true. Isaiah Hartenstein gets a drop, -1 to an 84. Lou Dort, +1 to an 81. We get Cason Wallace, +1 to a 77. He's really been defending well. Shot is starting to come back around. Kendrick Williams has played well off the bench too. 77 overall, +1 for him. And then A.J. Mitchell has really turned heads as a backup guard for the Thunder, +1 to a 75. Going over to the Minnesota Timberwolves, we have Julius Randle dropping -1. We'll see if they try to get off of Randle by the trade deadline. It just hasn't looked great. The ball stoppage between him, then Edwards jacking a lot of threes. Even though Edwards has been successful, I just don't see them pairing together well. It hasn't looked really good. Naz Reid has struggled. He goes -1 to an 80 overall. Dante DiVincenzo has really struggled. He goes -1 to a 75 overall. And then Josh Minot goes +1 to a 71, briefly in and out of the rotation. So Portland Trailblazers, we get some changes for them. Anthony Simons is back healthy. He goes +1 to an 82 overall. Denny Advia He's played really well coming off the bench, 81 overall, +1. Shaedon Sharpe has struggled shooting lately. He goes -1 to a 79, but who's really kind of struggled for them and has been up and down is Scoot Henderson. He gets a big drop by 2K here, -3 to a 75 overall. Golden State Warriors, like I mentioned, they get Dennis Schroeder. We'll see how that works out for them. If he's not moved again at the deadline. Jonathan Kuminga has been in the starting lineup in place of Draymond Green. He gets a bump +2 to an 81 overall. That's surely just to showcase him in order to move him elsewhere since they couldn't agree on a contract extension. Gary Payton II, +1 to a 76 or 77 overall, excuse me. And then Lindy Waters the third goes a -1 to a 75 overall. Last but not least, the Washington Wizards. Malcolm Brogdon is now tied with Jonas Valanciunas as the best player on the team. Ironically, both guys could be dealt at the trade deadline. So we'll see. Surely Valanciunas gets dealt. We'll see what happens with Brogdon. But looking at the ratings, Jordan Poole -1 to an 81 overall. Bilal Coulibaly has really been up and down. Looked a little bit better the last few games. +1 to an 80 overall. Marvin Bagley III gets a +1 to a 77 overall. Jared Butler's been in the rotation. He gets a +2 bump to a 75. Also in the rotation has been Justin Champagnie, who's really gone off since getting in the starting lineup. I believe he's averaging like 15 a game, if I remember looking at that correctly the other day. +3 bump to 74 for him. And then Johnny Davis has finally strung together some games again where he's looked like a decent NBA rotation backup. He gets a +2 bump to a 73 overall. That will wrap up the fourth official NBA 2K25 player ratings update. Is there anybody that you guys think should have went up that did not go up, or that should have got a drastic drop that did not drop? Look at the Operation Sports forum. I always post the written notes there. If you're curious, underneath it, the Real 2K Insider always adds his analysis of breaking down kind of the games and what correlates with the ratings. And then he always gives the badge updates as well. Also, something that I don't know that a lot of people know about, NBA 2K Wiz is a site to where you can it's basically 2kwiz.app is the site. You can go to it and see all of the ratings in real time. Basically showing every time there's an update, they update the ratings. You can look at that. You can basically take that data and then copy it into an Excel sheet. Have it for yourself. You can kind of look at what's changed, things like that. It's a really good tool I think everybody should use. There's a video on my channel if you really want to know about it. Mohammed's the owner of 2K Wiz. He's a fantastic guy. Really cool stuff that he's able to do on the site. So make sure you're checking that out if you're curious about, hey, what player might have a 75 overall three-pointer but is under 80 overall that I could go get maybe for my franchise. Or you're just curious about the ratings update yourself and see kind of what's changed. Like I said, you could take that and put that in a Google Sheets or Excel document and then see kind of what's changed rating update to rating update. Usually in the next, it takes a few hours to update and get that out, but he should have that out today with a new update. So check it out. It's 2kwiz.app. And as always, please make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already. My goal by the end of NBA 2K25 is to hit 3,000 subscribers. We're about 500 or so away. Would really, really like that support. Also, please, I don't ask much, but if you like the video, even if you only have $1 that you could donate, there's a donate link on my profile. Even if it's $1, it helps the channel. I eventually would like to get a really good mic set up and then go from there. just to kind of improve the quality of the videos and things like that. So that helps with that. Plus, it keeps my wife kind of at bay, not purchasing expensive things and things like that. But would like to really get a good mic upgrade, so that would help. Like I said, anything you guys can donate, just all the content that I bring to 2K would be really, really appreciated. For those that have already donated, thank you so much. That's really helped go into the channel and help things get better. Make sure you're having a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I should have another couple videos out sporadically just of custom content and things like that. So look out for those videos throughout the holidays. Otherwise, make sure you're staying safe. Enjoy the time with your family and friends, whoever you're with for the holiday season. Hope it's merry and bright. Hope everybody has a great rest of your week, and take care.